Welcome to episode 82 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger, and I'm back. It's been a little bit. We had a little break. We had some events and some weddings, and Tim and I were busy, but we're back on the saddle, and hopefully we'll be resuming the weekly podcast. So yeah, Tim, take it away.
Absolutely. It's great to be back. And 82, I remember 1982. I'm that old. I graduated high school in 1982. That's when I started college. I wanted to give a few shout outs before we go to our sponsors. I just want to mention a few people. So I had the pleasure of doing a guest lecture at the Stony Brook University College of Business, and the students are now listening to our podcast. They're telling me how much they like it. So this is an MBA program. This was a digital marketing class that I had the pleasure of teaching. I brought up the podcast, and now we have a whole bunch of new fans. Nicole Chan reached out, Evan Gower reached out, and Professor Stacy Finkelstein reached out. She studies consumer behavior in marketing. A lot of great new fans. I'm really appreciative of that. Please bring your friends along. Happy to do another class about this too. Maybe Isaiah will join me in the next one.
I would love to come by. It's not far, you just figure out how to pay for some of my expenses and I'll be there.
We will do that. We will do it. But anyway, it's just great to have that experience. I want to give them a very special shout out. And now I'm going to pause for a moment for our sponsor mentions.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to give you a word from our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Balance. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance. Our next sponsor is TradeCentric. TradeCentric transforms the way businesses transact by enabling punch-out, purchase order, and invoice automation solutions for over 3,000 companies around the world. Uniquely positioned at the intersection of e-commerce and e-procurement, TradeCentric helps B2B buyers connect with suppliers and automate payment, procurement processes to drive greater efficiency and user adoption of streamlined systems. Learn more at tradecentric.com. Thank you to our sponsors.
Okay, everyone. Thank you for listening to our ads for our sponsors. Please be sure to spend a lot of money with them. And now I'm going to throw this back to Isaiah, and he's going to introduce our guest.
Yeah, super excited to have Mark Simon. Am I saying that right? Is it Mark Simon?
That's correct.
Yeah, from Vice President of Strategy at Celigo. We've been working with Celigo, I don't know, man, probably since we started the company on my end, Trellis, we knew about you guys. I mean, you guys were very much like a NetSuite focused business, but now, you guys are really an iPaaS kind of broad solution that can integrate everything to everything theoretically. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started here, and what the company's about.
Yeah, thank you, Isaiah and Tim. So my career really started back, longer than I like to admit, over 20 years ago, and that makes me feel really dated. But originally as a software engineer in what I kind of considered the early wild west of the internet, and especially e-commerce. And that led to a role basically being on the founding team and being CTO of an e-commerce startup here in Seattle, where we took a company from basically 0 to 15 million in revenue in like 2.5 years without any outside venture funding. And really kind of bootstrapped effort. And one of the things we did there is adopted something. I would almost say it was purposeful at the time, but in some ways it was accidental. But adopting what I call an automation first mentality, and we really did. We're very scrappy and had to be very efficient. We also realized, hey, you can't just throw bodies at things. How can we automate and really set the groundwork for success and rapid growth there with efficiency without doing things manually. And after exiting there, I moved into consulting and focused, led a professional services practice in the mid-market that was very focused on digital transformation. So typically with an ERP implementation at its core, and then surrounded by that with either custom software solutions and or integration. And almost every one of those projects involved integration to other systems of some kind. And within that practice that I led, we also had e-commerce practice that was focused on both B2B and B2C. And through that, we worked on about 500 implementations and digital transformation initiatives there before being acquired. And then when I got out of that, I just said, hey, I want to go where the real action is, which at the time I thought and still believe is SaaS software. And I joined Celigo about 4 years ago as the VP of strategy there. And I focus on our upper segment of customers that are adopting Celigo as their core integration platform as a service, and do a lot of work on across all our departments in the organization to work with customers to really kind of optimize their outcomes, help them be more efficient. I would pull a lot from my background there. Really kind of really essentially solve problems wherever it may exist, from the sales cycle all the way through a customer that's been with us for several years. And with that, I get a really kind of unique opportunity to see a lot of things out there. We have over 5,000 customers at Celigo, so I get to see what works, what doesn't. We have customers in every type of vertical, and also every size, from Fortune 50 customers all the way down through a lot of SMB. But being a unique position at Celigo, where we've become the leading mid-market integration platform and automation solution for businesses. It gives us a great opportunity to see companies going through some really critical stages of growth, and it's a lot of fun to be part of that and help them unlock their potential.
Wow, that was a lot, but also awesome at the same time. So, is it fair to say that Celigo might maybe you guys will go public, or it'll be another acquisition? Because I mean, your track record seems pretty good here, so I feel like you probably
you never know what the future will hold. So things are going well, and we're growing, and we're gaining market share, and we're looking at the future, at what's next. Really about becoming an automation platform for mid-market businesses, and providing a more and more complete set of capabilities for our customers. So with that, who knows what could happen.
I just hope you guys don't sell to one of these like big. I feel like everyone, it's like there's everyone. We already just saw it happen a bunch recently, but it's like our favorite vendors, they get bought out, and then you're like, oh man, now we gotta like work with like this big company, and it's just not the same. You know what I mean?
Well, it isn't, and unfortunately we see that happen a lot with our vendors too. We're a big purchaser of SaaS software, and you see somebody get purchased, and then all of a sudden the innovation like slows, and then it feels like it almost like goes.
Are we talking about Adobe? Is that what we're talking about?
Hey, I was pretty disappointed with the Figma purchase. I don't know. I feel like
it made a lot of people think twice.
I just don't really. It's like, hey, you guys are winning. You're doing good. Like, why did you just like you kind of like you solve the problem? You're beating the biggest player in the market, and then you just sold to them. I don't know. It makes no sense to me. It's like I don't know. That's why, it's like, it reminds me of sports, right? I think that's why Kevin Durant, I don't know if you follow basketball, he got a lot of flack. It's like, you don't just like go join the best team. Like you beat them. Like, Michael Jordan lost until he finally beat them, right? Like I feel like we've lost that in business where it's just like, I can't beat Adobe, I can't beat Microsoft, so I'm just going to go join them. And it's just like, there's no innovation because it's all,
That's a whole other topic.
That's not the point of this podcast, by the way. I'm just complaining.
No, it's a whole other topic.
This is a general
Adobe.
complaint, Mark. This is not.
Yeah. Well, but it's a really interesting point you bring up, and I think one of the things is you go through, you see this with founders and the core teams in growing companies, software companies. It's such a push for so long. It's hard, and I think they set their sights on something, whatever it may be, whether it's 100 million in recurring revenue or 250. They set their sights on something, and then they achieve it, and they might not have. They're kind of they're not pushing for the next big thing. And you see something like that with Figma, which is it's starting. From my standpoint, it's like, wow, it's starting to become ubiquitous at a certain level. And it's like, wow, that's just their door to truly huge growth was just opening. And so it's you look at that and you say, oh, where could it have gone had they continued?
Well, it's probably also, like you said, one of those things where like, now we got to build out the enterprise infrastructure and all the things that come with being a $20 billion, whatever the next phase is. And it's like, we could do that, or we could just sell and not deal with that because the company we sell to already has that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, they've solved those problems already. Yeah.
It's sort of the other definition of integration, though. Like, there are failures of integration. So businesses that get swallowed up into IBM, SAP, Adobe, and Salesforce and Microsoft. Sometimes it's worked, and oftentimes it hasn't. They haven't been integrated. And so it's kind of interesting that it comes back to what Celigo does, right? Celigo excels at integrations, but we're not talking about these companies getting integrated into other companies. It's a completely different kind
all
of
I'm saying is, please don't sell yet, at least for a few more years.
Wait a few years.
Please give us a few more years of I'm sure if you want
there are no plans on the table right now, so you don't need to worry about that.
All right, listeners, you've heard it.
We have a lot more to accomplish out in industry.
Yeah, let's get into nitty gritty. We've loved working with you guys. We've seen the innovation. Even since we started working with you guys, the product has gotten way, way better, and we've been really impressed by that. Tell us about you said like you've seen the bad and the good. Can you give us like kind of maybe some sort of generic examples of like, here's a company that's doing a good job. They bought it for the right reasons. They're using it correctly. They're seeing success. And then here's a company that like just utterly failed. And I feel like those stories are really valuable because those mistakes are often repeated, and you might save someone from a painful mistake.
well, hopefully we can pass on some hard learned lessons that we've seen out there. But that's a great question, Isaiah. So one of the things we see with companies is they're very often they're trying to get they're seeking to get more value from their systems investments, and we see this pattern over and over again. And this the one that I've seen most often is through an ERP purchase. So you have a growing company, it reaches a certain limit what you can do without a real ERP, and some of the things around that whether they're homegrown or they're running on a QuickBooks or something. And eventually you
QuickBooks is the common one, right? Like it's Xero QuickBooks,
Yep.
What I see is, for Trellis or services, we can probably scale QuickBooks pretty big. But, when you have inventory and physical products, it's just not really designed for order management, inventory management. I mean, they have those features, but like it's very rudimentary. And so all of a sudden you're a $20 million business trying to do inventory management in QuickBooks. It's like, it's probably not going to work,
Yeah, it's going to be a big challenge, definitely. Yeah. And one of the things we see there is that they go down that path and they get there, they make the right choice. Hey, we need better systems. They make that investment. And one of the hardest things you can go through as a company is an ERP implementation. let's face it, probably the only thing tougher is going to be,
I mean,
being an acquisition or a significant merger.
yeah, one of the things we prided ourselves is integrating with ERPs, and we've learned a lot through doing that. We aren't ERP implementers, but we integrate with them on the e-com side, and the pain we see coming from that part of the business is just like, it's crazy, right? It's just like,
it's awful. It's usually the projects I get involved in, companies will say that's the given. Like, you can't touch ERP, we can touch anything else.
yeah, or they're so ingrained in some old system, they can't upgrade. They're stuck on something, that green screen AS4. I mean, there's AS400 out there. It's like, and I'm sure you see it. You've probably seen everything. You've probably seen almost every ERP. Celigo probably has touched like almost every ERP in the world.
Unfortunately, yes, there's some ugly stuff out there. Yeah, and those companies, they got, when you hear that, getting in that lock, oh, we're afraid to touch this, oh, we can't change this, and you start to see things. And I saw this a lot in consulting coming in, was you go through someone's business, but you're like, wow, that doesn't sound very efficient. You kind of file this away, you take some notes, and then you ask some questions on that, and you start asking around, you dig a little more, and there you finally get the heart of, and ultimately they say, well, yeah, we can't change that because we can't touch those systems. And you're like, are you telling, they might have had a process that was defined and implemented years ago, and now they don't want to touch it. And what I'm hearing when that comes across, is that the business, they can't evolve their business. They can't move forward. They've lost agility as an organization, because either they don't want to touch the one of the systems, i.e. the ERP, or they don't want to mess with the integrations that they've already built and have in place, or both, because they're simply too hard or too difficult to change, or even in some cases,
and they're too scared. I think it's a fear mindset too, right?
Definitely.
It works. We make money enough to stay alive, and the idea of changing that is so scary to them. It's so fundamentally, different from what they're already doing. But you're right. It's like, but I don't think what people realize is that if that's your mindset, at a certain point, you're also kind of like nailing your own coffin down into the, like, so that's a bad analogy, but you're basically like, burying yourself in business that like at some point you have to change. You can't just like have the same process for 30 years.
Exactly. That the nailing that coffin, I think, is a good analogy. You're putting a limit, you're putting a cap on your growth,
yeah,
and your ability to change, and restricting your agility. And if we've hopefully, if anyone's learned anything over the last 2 or 3 years, it's that the world it can change at a moment's notice, and it can change drastically. And if we go through periods where there's extremely rapid change, and it feels like things are just changing, one thing after another is stressing businesses, changing supply chain, changing supply, demand, working conditions, you name it. And if you're not an agile business and you don't have agility in your systems, you can't withstand those disruptions. They're gonna have an adverse impact on your business, but also those are opportunities. And if you're if you're living in fear of moving your business forward, all of those are going to be, you're only going to look at those negative things that you have to survive and try to make it through somehow, instead of looking at them as opportunities and seeing the opportunity there. And if you have that agility, and that's what we've seen, back to your question, what we've seen with customers is those that have set their organizations and their systems up for agility could take advantage of all of this disruption we've seen, and be agile, move quickly, and then take advantage and grow the business and expand when their competitors were faltering and struggling just to stay in business.
Yeah,
it's really about setting up innovation processes. That's what I always end up saying, is that the agility is a part of that. It's like it is really innovation that you're doing at all times. It's like, well, is it a new system that has to come into play, a new partner that we need to get, new way of looking at things. And you want to do that in an agile way, but it's really those questions all the time you have to keep asking.
Yeah, Tim, I think that's a great point, because it's about the mindset towards the business, and there's some key concepts around how you think about your business, your systems, your processes within it that really set you as a business leader, how you set yourself up for growth. And what I saw a lot in ERP implementations or big custom software initiatives or e-commerce projects was you'd get through this big project, and there was the old school mentality is, oh, we do this project and we're going to launch it and we're going to go live and there's going to be this big bang and then we're going to leave it alone and it's done.
And then we're going to
And
make more money. It's like, yeah, you're not buying a product. Like, oh, if we just like buy this new refrigerator, our like cold food will be better. It's like, it's not that simple, you know?
it's not that simple. You're buying something, you have to continually evolve it. Is your business going to continue to evolve and grow? It should be. No one's existing in a static environment, and so your systems, your processes, they need to keep evolving. And so it's not we're one and we're done, and then we're going to come back in 3 years and revisit it. You have to be thinking, okay, how do we modify and adjust this and keep pace? And it's like it's an evolution. And if you approach your systems in that way, your integrations, your automations in your business, your fundamental business processes, what's amazing is those companies that adopt that, they evolve in sometimes directions you could have never planned on. If you sat down at the beginning, you would have been, if you said, okay, we need exactly what they need. But if you take a more iterative approach, and evolve as the needs of the business grow in line with the strategic direction, it's really amazing what it enables and how it actually empowers employees in the company to automate, to grow, to optimize the business. We see some really cool effects with that with customers that have that mindset.
Let's talk a little bit about iPaaS and Celigo and what that, because I think it brings an element of agility if you do it correctly. But it also requires a certain level of business, right? Like, let's be honest, right? I mean, if you're $1 million business, probably don't need Celigo. I mean, there's going to be cases where they maybe do, but if you're 5 people, you can probably get away with doing most things manually. Maybe use some Zapier kind of things, or just like a Shopify website with some apps and a ship station or something like that, right? Like it's not that complicated, right? Like you don't need enterprise integrations. But once you start to get to, let's say, $10-20 million, I'm using these very high level numbers. There's always exceptions, right? But I think $10 to $20 million is a critical point where, like, if you're a $20 million business, you probably have enough complexity where you have multiple systems. You probably need an ERP system. That ERP system probably need to connect to other systems. And you probably need to do it in a way that's somewhat unique to your business model using an iPaaS solution. And you need to be ready for change. And iPaaS can be that thing that helps you change. You know what I mean? Like, so
exactly.
You talk about that a little bit. And like, obviously we all know, like, if you're Fortune 500 and you don't have an iPaaS, it's like, what are you doing? I don't know. Like, you're like, so
yeah.
I think most of the Fortune 500 probably is aware of iPaaS. They're probably like, they have Celigo or a competitor. They might not be using it correctly, but they probably had it. You know what I mean? Like
and older businesses in the Fortune 500, the larger one, they have different problems around their iPaaS. Their problems tend to be more around, well, they have one or multiple, but they're very, very, very technology heavy. They're very developer oriented, and they're not really able to democratize automation. And that's a problem we see with the bigger ones versus smaller companies. Really, the thing we see them is often growth companies in that smaller revenue range. And we have companies down that are adopting and leveraging Celigo as an iPaaS that are under 5 million in revenue. It really just depends on the approach that you want to take. And if you look at the labor costs involved, if you really look at what it costs for people to move data around manually in your organization to rekey your orders, if you take B2B for example, what does it cost to take an order out of a B2B that you've taken in a B2B system, whether it's BigCommerce or Magento, or maybe you've just put up a shingle on Shopify, but if you're what is it costing you to move those orders across manually? And what's interesting, as a business evolves, it sort of creates this burden internally, this manual work that builds up much faster than you realize. And all of a sudden, you add up and you've got 10 people in the organization, but you're like, okay, well, we're spending a full-time equivalent just moving data over and just moving orders over and order updates back. And you're like, that's let's be honest, that's crazy. It costs a fraction of that headcount cost to automate that and leverage a platform, an iPaaS platform, to then set yourself up for all of the other automation you need in your business. So there's often kind of
better to do it small, right? If you can afford it and do it early.
Yeah,
I mean, you're right. It's better to do it when you're $3 million and you're like, okay, we're scaling from 3 to 10 instead of waiting until we're 10. Let's just do it now. The point I was making is more just that some of these really small businesses, they're so early stage, they have such fundamental issues that sometimes they're like, well, we just need to get marketing to work so that people even know who we are.
Exactly. I mean, you've got to get your revenue streams up and running. You've got to be selling your product, whatever it is, whether it's physical or virtual. You've got to have your sales channels up and running. You've got to get some revenue flowing through in order to have something really to automate. You're 100% correct.
Well, it's like the special needs of some startups. I mean, I often bring that up too. It's that, we talk about small business and we talk about enterprise and everything in between, but there are special needs for a startup. You have to get to a particular point.
Exactly.
Unless if you have $100 million sitting there, it doesn't mean you're going to spend it all on like iPaaS when you're making $10,000, right? It just
no, it doesn't. And getting involved in iPaaS and building some integrations is actually a lot less expensive. And that's the only thing I would want our listeners to take away is just ask that question. It's like, oh, should we automate that? And as long as you're asking that question, you're going to be if you ask that question and evaluate what you're in spending in manual labor and the cost of that in mistakes that come from manually moving data around, if you really weigh those, it's often very, very surprising. And so, but that kind of leads to where are the common inflection points that we see, and back to your question, Isaiah, in that 10 to 20 million range, the big inflection point we see with an organization is that they're purchasing an iPaaS for the first time. They're shifting from a smaller solution. They said, okay, we've got limitations. We have struggles with visibility. We need more order management, more inventory management capabilities, and they're shifting as an organization. And that's that iPaaS, that ERP purchase is kind of the key inflection point, and that then generally triggers a lot at that point. We see automation initiatives starting further, but that's really the big one. And that's the huge one for an organization that size, and that's where we often come in, and because they're not just implementing an ERP for the sake of getting better visibility. It's really the beginning of a digital transformation effort.
What are they usually integrating at that size? So what are the systems, is it like a NetSuite to BigCommerce, NetSuite Magento, NetSuite Shopify? That's probably the one that I would guess is probably pretty common.
Exactly. Those are the most common things we see. Is we almost universally a company that size, we start at automating the order to cash or the quote to cash business processes. Okay. So those sales channels, getting orders in from those sales channels, getting updates, order updates back out to the sales channels, so the customers can be more self-service, knowing when am I going to answer the question themselves, when am I going to get my stuff, and also getting inventory synchronized back and forth, in automating that first channel, and then generally, we're starting with either their first sales channel, or maybe they've actually broadened out to 2 or 3. And like, okay, this is a problem. We've got 3 sales channels. We're like, there's a lot of
like
problems.
Amazon. Like, are you like, okay, you're selling on Amazon? It's like, well, we got to get those orders into the ERP. We got the website orders. We got the store. Maybe POS or something. It's like, all of a sudden it gets complex quickly, right?
It does get complex quickly. And whether you're doing B2C, where we see a proliferation of many channels like that, like you mentioned, the Amazons, maybe a Shopify, maybe a Walmart, maybe an eBay, and then multiple marketplaces across those. You've got to have good systems and data flowing back and forth in a timely, very consistent manner, so that you can implement a channel allocation strategy, so you can you're not overselling. But even within B2B, you're often going to have often going to have probably two different channels. If you've got a B2B e-commerce channel, you might very often we see it's common that maybe there's multiple implementations of B2B that are for your customer segmentation, or you've got your maybe a traditional channel for order taking. There's a CRM. But essentially, you've got 2 routes, at least almost 2 routes, if you've gone to B2B e-commerce, where orders can flow, and you need to have those synchronized and get visibility at that level where the customer's online buying, or
another couple just to add to that. So one of the folks I'm working with right now, they have distributors. They're selling directly B2B. Then they have the distributors. Then they have like franchised and non-franchised sellers in retail locations, and and the non-franchised are owned, right? Owned retail locations, right? All of these are unique. They're different. They all get to make
right?
different.
You have to pay the franchise people differently. I know I've seen a business model like that. It gets really complex.
Great example.
It's really complicated real fast, and they have 100,000 SKUs basically.
Wow.
Yeah. So because it's a parts type business, so it really is it's fascinating, it's fun, but it's also freaking crazy. Because it's like, well, can we simplify this by getting rid of one of these? You can't go to them and say get rid of the franchises, right? You have to come up with solutions that work within their system.
But that's what a lot of people don't realize, is actually by really architecting holistically with iPaaS, you can actually simplify a lot of things, right? A lot of times people are doing things in a really complicated way because they haven't thought about how to integrate everything. And then a big thing that I see is people haven't really thought through what is the master record of what. So let's go up a level. Like we kind of talked about that first evolution, 10 to 20 million. I see generally, I feel like that can be solved with Celigo, with a NetSuite, and a e-com platform, a couple channels, some good marketing. You could probably be running pretty well in that space with that kind of setup, right? And maybe not too many more systems, right? But once you get into like the 100 million, 200 million, $500 million business, that's where I start to see, one, they're usually legacy, right? So they have like all these random systems that people have bought over the past like 20 years. Like you start asking them what systems you have, and it's like, oh yeah, this guy bought this, but he's no longer there. We're not even sure like what it does anymore. They have like 4 analytics tools that do the same thing or can do the same thing. They have an ERP, they have a CRM, they have PIM. Like, it's like, well, is your ERP the customer record, or is your CRM the customer record, right? It's like, now you have some pretty difficult questions to answer. And even for me, it's like, I could probably answer for you, but I have to like really dig into your business, because those are not easy questions to answer. Like, right?
Exactly. And one of the things you're getting at here, answering those questions and properly asking those, that's really key for that next stage of growth. As an integration solution, and an automation provider at Celigo, we see this very often. Customers at that next stage of growth, and really any stage, they really struggle around their business processes, and in having those very clearly outlined and having a clear plan for how they want their processes to flow, how they want that data flow, and through that you have to do that to fundamentally answer those questions. What is the master of this record? Where is it being updated? Which direction? You have to look at those processes and really make sure you've got those well mapped out for where your business is at. because often those older businesses, things kind of creep. So things creep through change management. They end up with a lot of errors or systems that don't necessarily reflect how their business is really running now. And so that inflection point is really very key to make sure that they're doing that diligence to work that out, do that upfront work on the processes, on those endpoint systems, and then we come in and we can then you automate a refined, a good process, and that's where we see them. That's where this kind of the forcing function of going like, hey, we need integration, and it forces you to kind of work through. That causes a lot of growth in an organization right there, like positive growth for it.
Yeah, just by like going through the exercise of like, let's use Celigo to like make ourselves better, we'll open up a lot of, it's like, well, why do you do that? Like, why does, and then you're like, well, we could automate that, but should we do it differently? And it's like, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, we do that because it worked when we were a $10 million business and we still do it, but we're a $200 million business. It's like, probably should be doing it differently now. You know what I mean? It's like,
exactly. Because with business processes, and I saw this a ton in my ERP implementation work, and I see this a lot now in integration, is there are key business processes that really they're going to be best off as a company if you adopt the best practice for industry. What is sort of the common denominator that businesses are landing on? And if your process deviates from one of those standard ones, you've got to ask the question, is this competitive differentiation for us? And if the answer is yes, and it should be yes some of the time, it shouldn't be 90% of the time, but it should be 10 or 20% of the time, then that justifies change and customization if it's a competitive advantage. And whether that's a customization in your ERP or your e-commerce platform or in your integration, if it is, yeah, you should say yes, and then you lean in. And that's where flexible platforms come in. But I'm sure you've seen a lot of it. I bet where you've got someone insisting, everything we do all these things differently, but they can't really tell you why or show you the value of those. And those are the things that you've got to shift.
Yeah, sometimes what I see is people do things because that's what their system does, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good for best practices for their business. I think you brought up a super important point, so I want to dig into that. And Tim, maybe you have some ideas on this, but like what I think the problem is people just don't know what the best practice is for these processes. And it also depends on your type of business, your stage of business, your distributor, your manufacturer, your B2B, B2C, maybe you're both, you're multi-channel, you're online, you're in-store, whatever. It's hard, right? Because like there's no like book you can go read and it's like business practices, best practices for like $20 million distributor selling like whatever parts, like you were talking about the 100,000 SKU, right? Like, yeah. How do you go about figuring out what those best practices are?
I'll dive in and then I'm going to throw this right to Mark, because the quick answer for me is that I've been asked to help define the best practices for this particular client, because they realize that they only have those in certain pockets of their business. They don't know what the KPI should be. They don't know what the best practices should be. So what do? You dive in and you do these competitive analyses and you say, well, here's what a lot of the other people are the best in something similar to what you're doing versus others, or here are things you can learn outside of your category that might be of interest that could come in and be
they're applicable, right?
Yeah. But that's kind of what I'm doing. I have 17 people. I'm not exaggerating that number. 17 people working on this project. All right, it's a lot of people. So I'm running around trying to help them answer some of those questions. It's fascinating, and I wish I could mention their name, but I cannot.
No, I understand. Well, it doesn't matter. The name doesn't matter, right? I'll give you an example, right?
Doesn't matter.
Buy online, pick up in store, right? There's probably a best practice for that. And so maybe you're right, you go, you look at Walmart, you look at Target, you look at the best ones, you say, okay, this is how they do it.
That's kind of what we're doing. And we're doing it very selectively to the things that have the most revenue impact for the business and can be done relatively.
The only thing that gets tricky is you don't necessarily know how they do it behind the scenes, right? Like unless you have someone that worked on that project, you can see it on the surface level. but you don't necessarily know what's happening after the order's placed.
I give and now I get carte blanche to go in and ask those questions in the business and say, well, now tell me all the dirty secrets, like what works and what doesn't, and why don't you do it better, right? Those kinds of things, which is fun.
So Mark, where do you go with this? Like, how do you?
Yeah, so one of the things I think as a company where you're not sure where those practices are is you want to look at your software vendors for your foundational applications that you're using, your ERP, your e-commerce platforms, your integration platform. They see, I mean, we, as an iPaaS, we see customers across, so we see patterns emerge. And so you can ask, that's key to sort of leverage and see, like, well, if this doesn't fit, if we've adopted an ERP and they have 1,000 or more customers in our that are in our line of business, and our business process doesn't fit in here very well, you've got to ask some hard questions. Why? And so you can look from that standpoint. What are the systems? What are the best practices? As an integration provider, we do this with our customers where we can show them the patterns that have emerged, right? So we have thousands of customers that are selling that are product based, that are selling one or more online channels, whether B2C or B2B. The leading ones have established a very common pattern of how they approach automation through their business. I can say, hey,
can you talk about that a little bit? Like, just give some specific examples.
Yeah, so like some specific examples would be like where and how you start. So we talked about that earlier, starting out in your order to cash, getting your kind of basically putting together a roadmap. And we work with our customers to put together roadmaps. We're typically starting at those revenue generating channels. So you want to get those up. You want to get, the first thing you want to do is you want to get your orders automated from the point where they're originating into your order management system or ERP. Get that automated, and so the orders are hands off, and you won't necessarily, depending on your business, you might not get to 100% automation, but you can get to, you take off a bite at a time. If you have a use case and it only covers 40%, start there. That's a step forward. But typically we can see companies very quickly getting to 90, 95%, 99% automation for getting their orders in. You expand across getting inventory synchronization, integrating with your fulfillment centers, or if you're doing this in-house or a combination, your warehouse management system, and then broadening out from there and moving in. You get that order to cash, you get your returns process working efficiently, returns and
kind of orders, right? It's just a return order, but yeah, it makes so much sense, right? Like if you're duplicating orders manually, right? It goes through, Magento, Shopify, then you have to manually go place that in NetSuite. It's like, it's just not an efficient process, especially once you start having 10 or 20 or 1,000 orders a day. Like once that order volume daily goes up, it's like, it's just crazy. And then when you have multiple channels, so the order to cash makes sense.
Yeah.
Inventory makes sense. Pricing is probably where it gets complex. I think pricing is where it gets really complex. We've done some pricing integrations, but it can be really challenging in B2B because they might have different customer pricing, and that can be pretty hard.
I keep pushing people to tiers. I really try very, very hard.
Yeah. We've built a real-time pricing integration for some ERPs, but what makes pricing difficult is like the pricing mechanisms are usually very different. Mm-hmm. So trying to take your ERP pricing and, mash it into, Shopify or Amazon, like they're not one-to-one tables, and so you get into a really, really bad place trying to do that.
Yeah, and that's a great, pricing strategy, particularly in B2B, is a great example of where you want to make sure that you're making the right, you have a strategy that either fits the systems that you have well, or if it doesn't and it requires a big customization effort, that you know that pricing strategy is a competitive advantage.
I really think to Tim's point, you should be moving towards an algorithm, and that could be a tiered algorithm, right? Where, hey, you do this, you go up and blah, blah, blah. I think even a lot of the big companies are already doing that. And then you could always just do coupon codes, right? Like, let's say you want to do a one-off discount. You could always just do like a coupon code that has like kind of a universal process mechanism that can go through the website or go through the ERP. And that way those one-off discounts are still kind of universally applied in a way that doesn't, you're not creating this like weird one-off pricing. It's just,
and the sad truth too is that a lot of, and again, this is true of legacy businesses and larger businesses especially, but the sad truth is that a lot of the pricing for their clients is also the lowest, like worst margin, right? When you figure it all in, the legacy pricing that they've got out there that they have to do, there may be volume, but it's not a lot of profit. And so you move to these other categories of, maybe buyers that are coming in through other channels that are extraordinarily high profit with a lot more automation, but they're not really putting the effort there yet, right? So it's this weird like mix of all of these different things that are at play. Okay. And I'll speak to this one company because I can do this because it was years ago. BMW had a very sweet deal for a particular thing that they were getting from this company I was working with, right? BMW had such a sweet deal. It was
BMW, right? So they're like, all right, we're going to give you the,
but because it was BMW, but they had the company got almost no profit out of that deal. And so it's like,
me.
So it's like, well, now what? Now we had this premier thing that we're using. But so it took them years to kind of work with BMW. They're still working with them to this day, making what they need to for that company, but they now have a much better margin that matches more closely the margins they have for other products. But
sometimes you just need to have an honest conversation and say, hey, BMW, we love you guys, but like, we're literally like not making money and we need to grow our business so we can serve you better. Like,
I won't be able to make this product any longer if we keep charging you this price. That's the conversation.
I've had those conversations where I'm like, I will not be able to keep my people if I don't raise my prices. So like, you've been a customer for 7 years, but I can't keep charging you like the 2013 rates. Like, have you seen what happened in the last 3 years? Like, I've got entry level people asking for like 100, people coming out of college are like, yeah, we'll take 100 grand. It's like, dude, you just graduated college. You have no experience. You're useless. Like, no offense to, some of these people, but like, you have no life experience. You're asking for like a salary that people used to dream of like 5 years ago. You know what I mean?
I'll take it. It'll be fine.
It's just crazy, right?
It is crazy. It's crazy.
But yeah, I think you've made so many important statements that honestly, just like, we need to like distill that out. We need to kind of summarize this at the end of this and market this, because I think these are really valuable. Like,
I think we do. Our listeners are going to love this because we talk about these topics from one angle or another all the time. And here we have an expert at like a premier company in the space. And, and I mean that genuinely. I'm not just saying this because there are a lot of companies that are out there. You're doing great work.
It's actually kind of shocking to me. And I think part of the reason that I think this is so important is like iPaaS is still a relatively new concept. Most companies don't really know what it is, except for like the big CTO level companies that have CTOs, and they've obviously been involved. But most companies don't even really have a CTO, right? So, or it's like a glorified CTO, right?
Yeah.
I'm like,
well, and you're hitting on a key thing.
CTO, that's a bad sign, right? I haven't done like real development in like 8 years. So like, if I can like talk to your CTO and like know more than him, like you need a new CTO.
You make a good point, Isaiah. And one of the things is that in mid-market, one of the things that I saw continually is a bit of a struggle for mid-market companies around particularly the lower and lower mid-market and definitely in SMB is the concept of where is the technology leadership in an organization. And this is a thing that I would ask working with a new prospect especially for consulting. Just throw that out there. Who's your technology leader? Who's making your decisions? And that would often tell you a lot about the organization. And it's very, very often they don't have someone who's really in that role. It's something that's sort of piecemealed or broken out. So you've got someone under the CFO or someone under them is thinking about that around finance systems. The CEO sort of
then they're
thinks
always
about
just
it.
trying to save money, right? The CFO is like, Trellis's hourly rate is too high. It's like, okay, you want to cheap out on your integration services? Good luck, right? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
We'll see you in 2 years when we can come rescue the project,
Exactly. And it's really key for those companies to find a trust if they're not going to have that technology leader in-house, because all companies are technology companies now. Any modern company is a technology company, and they have to really like understand that. And then they have to find trusted advisors. Find advisors. They don't have that in-house. They need to find advisors like yourselves, or what we often do at Celigo, who can help guide them. And that's really key, because without the technology leadership in-house, we see it really slowing down growth for organizations. They tend to make a lot of money.
And I think that it's just, one, they haven't really realized they need a CTO. Two, they don't know how to hire a CTO. So that's a big problem I see, is like, how easy it is to fool a company that's not technical that you're qualified to be the CTO? Like, you know what I mean? Like, who's interviewing the CTO, right? Like, it's a first time CTO for a company that has no real technical leadership. Who's doing the interview?
It's like a good question.
They could just throw out some buzzwords, and they're like, "Oh man, this guy's a genius. Let's hire him." And then he can't code for, he doesn't really know what he's doing. Or maybe
exactly, it's a challenge.
Development, but he's not a business leader, right? A CTO is a hard job if you want to do it well, right?
Definitely. It's that intersection of business and technology. It's not just a technology role, it's an intersection of the two, for it to provide value.
Yeah. Well, I know we're kind of coming up on time. Tim, I feel like it's time for your top question.
I am gonna have to excuse myself. I'll tell our listeners, I'm actually in Boston, Isaiah. I don't know if you know that. I'm at the Parker House Hotel in Boston. And I'm at a big multi-day event that ends on Sunday, and I'm on more than one panel, and one starts in about 15 minutes. So, listeners, sorry I'm doing this, but I'm heading out.
One chat to another.
What's that?
I said one chat to another.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, maybe you'll spread some of the knowledge we just gained from this.
I'm talking about how marketing has changed pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. So,
oh wow, yeah,
it'll be a lot of fun.
TikTok has exploded. It's kind of scaring me, to be honest, because I'm like, oh man,
that's one big change. That's absolutely.
I hate how you have to figure that all out. It's still, most companies aren't really significantly advertising on TikTok yet.
Not enough, and I'm out there all the time actually, and I'm always looking. So more from Trellis. That's what we need. More from Celigo.
Well, Tim,
right. I'm going to say ciao.
I'll ask your ending question. So,
yes, if please, you ask that if you want. That's totally cool. All right, I'm going to say ciao for now. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you, Tim.
So one of the questions Tim likes to ask, so I'll ask it on his behalf, is, what do you kind of see coming forward in the next 5 years? Like, where do you see this going? Obviously, you see it going somewhere because you're still at this company, and there's a reason you're there, right? So, where do you see things going, and like, where do you think companies should be going in that trajectory?
Yeah, when we look at where things are going, especially in the mid-market, mid-market's only scratched the surface of integration and automation.
Can I add to that? I think the mid-market is so important. That's where a lot of my focus is because the mid-market, they're either going to die off, which is not good, or they're going to become enterprise, right? Like every enterprise company was a mid-market company at some point, and there's generally this, hopefully some innovation where, some companies die off, and, we're seeing Bed Bath & Beyond is, I don't know, you think we're probably at the tail end of that, maybe, right? Like, wouldn't be surprised if we hear a bankruptcy kind of notice anytime soon, right? They were probably Fortune 500, and some mid-market company will take their place. So, sorry, I didn't want to interject too much, but like, the reason I'm saying it's so important is what they're doing is kind of like a window into what the future is, to some degree. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So much in the mid-market, they have momentum. They're moving. They've got critical mass now, and resources. You know, how to take advantage of that and how to capitalize and make those next steps to enterprise are really really important. You know, those strategies. And so with that, you know, one of the key thing with that is any organization, but particularly mid-market companies, we just see this proliferation of SaaS applications. We talk to mid-market companies all the time, and we'll be like, you know, there's some data that we recently saw where it said an average mid-market company has something like over 100 SaaS applications.
I believe
and you talk to somebody, and some people are like, no way. And then you're like,
you don't realize
okay,
Zoom,
well, let's just start in marketing.
Yeah, you know, it's a lot more than you think. Some of these are, you know, $100 a month, right? Like, it's not like they're necessarily super expensive, you know?
Yeah, $100 a month, and they're amazing, right? The proliferation of applications out there to solve business problems. It's amazing. There's never been anything like it before. It's fantastic, but it creates this. It solves problems, but at the same time, everyone universally, every business I talk to is always left feeling, wow, we've spent on all these different SaaS apps, the really expensive ones, but they're like, yeah, they solve problems, but there's always this but, and there's just this, everyone has this pervasive feeling that it's like, oh, we're not getting the value that we expected. This isn't quite solving the problem in the way that we expected to. And it's the reason for that is that everyone's adding in these SaaS applications, but and they're solving problems, but they're also creating new data silos, because very often they're not integrated into their business properly.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that most mid-market organizations, with the help of Trellis and Celigo and, you know, maybe some other people, you know, we can't do everything in the world, right? Maybe a few other partners, right? Because we don't do everything, could probably consolidate 30% of their software. So I'm convinced that you take that 100 SaaS applications that they've grown into, right, over in the mid-market, you really look at it and you say, okay, you have 3 things for marketing that do kind of the same thing. Which of these is the best? Because a lot of times also when they bought the SaaS application, it didn't do X, Y, Z. And now all of a sudden it has new features. So no one's gone back and said, hey, we've had this thing for 5 years. So like just your software 5 years ago, like think about it, right?
Huge. We have way more capabilities, and you're exactly right there. You end up with all this overlap, and so you need to consolidate. You end up with these silos. So it's very important for businesses to get the value from those, that they have a strategy, that they think about how to integrate these, how to bring the data together, and how to automate that. And right now, you know, we talk to a lot of companies, and I equate this to a little bit what I used to think about the ERP space. So going back, gosh, I'm afraid to admit it, like 15 years ago, selling the first SaaS-based ERP NetSuite, and I would and a leader of a company would tell me with a straight face, well, you know, yeah, they're resistant to putting their core financial data in the cloud, and they're like, well, yeah,
like, we got Tim in the closet hosting servers. It's way more secure.
Way more secure. and so there's that resistance to having your data in the cloud, and how this is, is that really more efficient? But even more, they would tell me with a straight face, yeah, or we'll build our own system. And I would hear that over and over again, and you know, if you go into a room and someone tells you they're going to build their own ERP now, you're just going to walk out of there because you're like, this is crazy. No one's going to do that now.
It's like, I laugh when people say they're going to build a new e-commerce platform. I think there's new systems, new platforms, but like, I think people really underestimate how hard it is to break into the market, which is why Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, you know, 4 or 5, Salesforce, it's like really only 5 core platforms that control, you know, 80% of the market or whatever, or the real important market, right? Same thing with ERP, right? NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics. ERP is a little more distributed, but still, like, NetSuite's friggin' taking over like the vast majority of the new installs, you know. So.
Exactly. And your point about e-commerce is really, there's no reason to build a custom e-commerce platform anymore.
I'll give you one exception. If you are really big, really sophisticated, and that could be a value add where you have the ability to invest millions of dollars, like in Amazon, you're almost like a tech company.
Yes,
right?
and we're talking about a very
mid-market, non-tech, like you're not a tech company, right? Yeah. Fair enough. I want to point that out.
I 100% agree with you there. And this is coming from having built too many that I admit custom e-commerce solutions over the years. But
so we do some, but they're generally for very sophisticated companies that have a very sophisticated strategy where, to your point, it's that 20% role where it is their competitive advantage. And they get that and they're investing in it. But if it's not, then just like buy
exactly. But in the scheme of things, those are relatively fewer and fewer even in the mid-market these days.
Yeah. I'd love to get more of those sales, but like I can't justify most of the time that it's a good idea. So it's a pretty rare sale for us.
Yeah. Agreed. And so, I think eventually everyone's going to look at automation and integration the same way. Right now, if you talked about integrating systems, someone's going to be like, well, yeah, we do that manually, or we have someone coding that
custom.
together.
I see a lot of custom integrations, right? So I think
exactly
a lot. So basically what you're seeing, if you don't mind me summarizing, is that iPaaS will be eventually kind of like Shopify, right? Like everyone knows Shopify or whatever, but not really everyone gets iPaaS. But eventually it's like you have your Shopify, you have your Celigo, you have your like NetSuite. You guys will just be kind of part of that like normalcy that's not really quite there, to be honest, right? Like
it's not quite there yet, but it will be. iPaaS will become in a few years, probably as early as iPaaS and an automation platform will become ubiquitous in mid-market, and it just be something.
I like the term automation platform because I think iPaaS is also just very confusing for people.
It's another acronym. Who needs another acronym? They're like a platform as a service, and really iPaaS can be a lot more than that. iPaaS is core of your automation strategy. And
I like the automation platform concept because I think that the average person can wrap their heads around that. It's like, I got my e-com platform, I got my automation platform, I've got my ERP. So now like you're like, okay, this is just normal. But like iPaaS, you're like, so what is that? You got to explain it, and then even explaining it is confusing. So
yeah,
I love that, and that's why we're so excited to have you guys on and continue. We'll definitely have to keep having you guys on every so often. I think we had Jeremy on a while back. So we like to have people back because in 2 years you'll have like something new that like it'll be all different,
Definitely. There's more than enough topics to cover. So.
Yeah, it's not hard to like. People are like, so what should we talk about? We only have an hour. Like we have an hour. I'm like, don't worry, we're not gonna run out of topics. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I assume people can kind of find you on LinkedIn. They can go to the website. Shouldn't be hard to get a hold of you guys, right? To get a free estimate.
Not at all. You can get a hold of us at Celigo.com, track me down on LinkedIn, all of the above. And yeah, happy to, we are, we live to help our customers be successful through automation. So that's what we're all, we have a whole company centered around that.
I always say just have a conversation, right? There's probably a lot of people that by just getting an estimate and a process that from you guys that's probably free in the sales process, they're probably going to get value, right? Even if they are not ready to buy.
A ton of value just from starting the conversation. It just you'll have a lot of ideas whether you're ready to put them in play now or a year down the road. But just starting the conversation just kind of opens your eyes often can to what's possible and what can be done.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and excited to get this live in a few weeks, so people will get to learn from you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. It was a pleasure.